Okay. I always forget to record, so here we are. Good start to this Friday. Hey everyone, it's good to see you. I know most of your faces from previous Vibe Tribes or retreats, some new faces on here. But as DJ said, part of the purpose of these monthly sessions is not just to learn from an expert we bring on, someone we're excited to hear about, but also to continue meeting each other and building community of coaches. We kind of adopted this term, an island of sanity for people as we're going through a really, just interesting times out in the world. So to have folks come together who you've graduated with, who are like-minded, who know the same coaching language that you've learned is really nice to just meet people with common interest and mindset and to keep this spirit alive. So that's part of what we're doing here. If you all have ideas for ways that you want to continue to get together and network and know each other, always ears open for that. So let me know, send me a note. And today we're really excited to have one of the faculty members, Mark Greenawald, as our guest of honor and talk about something he's very experienced in. Mark and I chatted last week and got down to kind of the nitty-gritty and focus of what he's excited to share with all of us today. So, as a quick way of introduction, I'll just, for those who don't know him, tell you a little bit about him. He's a physician leader, speaker, educator, facilitates workshops, and a writer. So, does many, many things in the world, and has an active medical teaching practice. Many leadership roles he serves for the Carilion Clinic, and that's including the vice chair for academic affairs and professional for that clinic. And and he's one of the staff and faculty members for the Coaching Institute as well. So I'm probably forgetting some things on there. DJ, I know you are very close with him, so I'll pass it to you as you guys
Okay.
get things kicked off.
All right. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah.
So most of you have been through the classes, and I've said this about Mark before. Had he not decided to play with us in this space many years ago, had he not said, yes, I will help you build the Healthcare Coaching Institute, it probably wouldn't have gone very far. So in that light, we welcome Mark to tease out really what's more than the family physician. And I think we probably limited that in our marketing, but what the physician's role looks like today and the tension that is getting created as the physician assumes a lot more roles in the generations of things that are happening there. So I think this is going to be really educational. There's a small group of you while we're recording the first 20 minutes or so to share out. We really would love your dance with us. And their questions as they pop up, put them in the chat room. Lauren's going to be looking for those. But Mark, why don't you give us sort of a high level overview? And if you want me to, I can pull up your one slide for this discussion, or you can. But to lead us through this Friday conversation where we're still creating community.
Yeah, thank you, DJ, and it's great to see everyone. Thank you for carving out this time so that we could have this chat together. I want to start, DJ, we'll do the slide in a little bit. I'll let you know when, but I want to start with the impetus for why this even matters to me, and therefore why I think it needs to matter for all of us who are coaching within healthcare, and as well as many of you are within healthcare in other roles as well. As Lauren said, I really straddle three roles right now within healthcare. I'm a practicing physician and a physician leader. I'm also an administrative leader as a physician within our healthcare system. And then I'm also a coach within the healthcare system. And so I really am living in all those spaces. And it's through that lens that I really want to come to this conversation today for us as many of us have dual roles, one of them being a coach, and to tell you about the story that was my epiphany as an administrative clinical leader. I've been in some kind of leadership role really since I started my career in healthcare, starting as a chief resident within my residency program. So I have been drawn to leadership from earlier times than that, but within healthcare from early start, from my beginnings. As I took on more leadership administrative roles and administrative time, I reached a critical mass, and the critical mass only happened probably now about 15 years ago, when I started taking on enough administrative responsibility, and particularly administrative responsibility outside of my common family, if you will, out into a bigger health system, where I found myself continually agitated and often frustrated. And that's not my natural state, and it's not a good look for me. And so, as I was in these different settings, and I would find myself coming from my clinic to an administrative meeting and just showing up as my less than best self, likewise, finding myself often feeling like patient care was interrupting some kind of administrative pressure that I was feeling and thinking, oh my gosh, this is not good if I'm in the middle of my clinic and I'm being distracted because there's some fire going on the administrative side. And this continued for some time. And to the point that I thought maybe I'm just not cut out for being an administrative leader within healthcare. Maybe this is just not my thing. But I realized one day that that was not the issue. The issue was that I had never been taught the fact that as I made those transitions from one hat, if you will, to the other, the skill set that I was needing to tap into was different. And not only different, but it was ultimately, it was many times diametrically opposed to the previous skill set that I had been using. So, in other words, in this case, my clinical skill set did not work well within my administrative work and my administrative leadership work. My administrative skill set that I was developing did not work well within my clinical setting. And no one had ever really taught me that before. And it was something that I was seeing many physician leaders going into their administrative roles and gaining a bad reputation because they were continuing to try to be clinical leaders, but that didn't sell well with their administrative colleagues. And I was finding administrative colleagues continually frustrated because those physicians were doing that and they felt like we're just not communicating and we're not connecting well. And it feels like often it was an antagonistic relationship. And so I started doing more research around that, and we'll show you in a minute a figure from a paper that I wrote recently to try to begin to capture this. And I'm not unique in that there have been others who have tried to capture it as well, of talking about this dynamic tension. But as coaches, I think the ability to be aware of that dynamic tension and to be able to, in many ways, help those you're coaching, both on the administrative side and on the clinical side, have insights into that, I think will help you allow them to move forward in a much more effective way, and sometimes helping them to identify where they are not straddling well those roles, or where they're trying to bring in a clinical skill set into their administrative role, or vice versa, and helping them develop perhaps that skill set, I think becomes essential for us as coaches. And so, DJ, let me just pause and put up the one slide just so everybody, this will provide us the opportunity to just see together for those of you who are more visual learners, this dynamic tension. So here's, and this is not exhaustive by any means, but if you look at the physician role and administrative role, let's just start with the first one, this whole idea of professional identity versus organizational identity. Those are both very important. In my leadership role, I would contend, in my physician role, both are very important, but they're not the same. And so often what is best for the organization is not necessarily best for what I've been trained to believe through my clinical eyes. And even you can say both of those would agree that the patient is the most important element in that process and the most important relationship. But how my organizational identity sees the patient and how my clinical self sees the patient are not necessarily always the same thing. And what is, quote, best for them. Again, you look at the second one, patient advocate versus organizational advocate. As a leader, I'm both of those, but again, those are not necessarily the same. Decision making versus planning and delegation. So as a clinician, I was trained to make decisions. I was trained to be decisive, whereas organizationally, often, yes, we do need to be decisive, but often it's pause and let's really step back and think about this for a while. And else do we need to invite into this? This whole idea that let's just go down to the last one, the last two, zero error tolerance, which is our clinical world, versus we're going to make errors all the time. When I look at budgets that organizations make, it's at best a rough estimate, and if that's even at best. And so if you're thinking that there's that kind of precision to everything that we do, and then you're exposed to something where it's like, yeah, we're off by a few million or a few hundred million, it will really cause a lot of tension and often emotional frustration because you're trying to bring that exactitude to something that's just not. This last one, individual expertise versus collaborative. I was trained to be an expert in what I do, and yet I have to begin to recognize that, particularly in the administrative side, there's many aspects that I don't have expertise in, or perhaps I do, but through a different lens. And then these shared pieces in the middle, which I think are really essential for, again, we as coaches to recognize that this whole idea of they're not all diametrically opposed. As leaders, we have some things that are very much common. Again, thinking about just purpose, and obviously everybody is intelligent and bright in terms of what they do, often very well trained and very highly trained, all the way down to emotional intelligence, which, as we know as coaches, is essential for the work that we do. So I want to just pause there to begin this conversation, but that's how we got to today, because I think as coaches and as leaders, we don't necessarily explicitly recognize this potential dynamic, which can be an incredible dynamic tension, or it can be an incredible dynamic synergy that we're coaching within in healthcare.
Thanks, Mark. This is actually really helpful and descriptive. And there is a meta conversation, right? There's a larger conversation that's happening that's putting so many pressures on both roles, the shared roles. And what I'm noticing in the systems that we're doing work in with the executive teams and that kind of thing is that there is this need to feel at every level, from the clinical to the administrator, that everything is getting done well. Everything is right. So when you say something about the error tolerance, yes, and the budget tolerance, yes, and there's like breaking things down so that people are authentic and that they're bringing fully who they are into every meeting, and all the things that are, signs on a wall that say the pillars that we have here around what we value include authenticity, include transparency, include vulnerability. And that goes flying out the window based on my experience and my view. So what do you think is needed as coaches when we go in to coach not only individuals, but the groups and teams, and sort of share experiences that will elevate the conversation to this point of the both and?
Yeah, and so I'll speak to that through the lens of teams, and let's start with what we call in our organization dyad teams.
Mm-hmm.
So a dyad team being a clinical leader connected or paired with an administrative leader, often somebody with an MBA or a master's in healthcare administration or something along those lines. So an MD or a DO usually can be an RN, can be a PA or a nurse practitioner as well, but paired with an administrative leader. And some of those administrative leaders are actually folks who have given up their clinical roles. We see this a lot with nurses, see this a lot with PAs and nurse practitioners. And they're now functioning, even though they have those initials after their name, they're functioning not as a clinician at all. And many of them don't even pretend to do that. So how can we then begin to have them be in different conversations with each other? And I think that for my experience from a coaching realm, it starts with something as simple, and we do this with our own dyad development that we do here, starting with conversations around expectations and a little bit about background. So first of all, understanding background. So how did you get to be where you are right now? And I think many times we don't know, particularly in the physician side. I have no idea what my administrative colleagues went through and why to become a hospital administrator or a vice president within an organization. What were their motives in doing that? So having those very human conversations that often I think we skip over can, I think, start to humanize the process. Then the second piece is expectations. And we do an exercise where we have engaged them in conversation after some pre-work of really talking about expectations, the expectations they have for themselves, the expectations they have for their partners, and then dialoguing about that. Because often what you find is that there are a lot of implicit expectations that are causing tension within a group. And once you make them explicit and realize, oh, no wonder I'm frustrated with you all the time. I thought this was your job. You're thinking this is my job.
Mhm.
Wow, we need to now negotiate that or come to a better understanding about that. But that's very different. And it's amazing how often those relationships will go on a very long time with that dynamic tension without ever pausing to talk about what's underlying this tension. And once you do that, you watch groups that were really at odds with each other coming together in beautiful ways in terms of complementing all the talents that are in the room.
Love the answer. And yeah, we've got Bill sitting here who's in your system and comes from
Yes,
the
he is.
clinical side and not the non-clinical side, right? And the executive side as an administrator. Bill, what is your experience of that, of this approach, and how's the dyad working for you?
What's interesting, I'm a community hospital president. We're the only folks in the system, Mark, that don't have a direct dyad.
I was just thinking that, Bill, I don't know that you have a dyad partner.
No, I don't, and that casts it casts me in a different role. So I get to be an observer and a helper, and because I don't have a specific dyad, I can be a resource for the different dyad partners. But it's always informal. I'm not coaching them directly. And it's always one off, and it's generally the frustrations. I'll get a call about so and so chair or so and so vice
Mm,
president from a chair.
mm,
Mark, when I saw your Venn diagram, I don't know if it was happenstance or purposeful. That purpose was the first thing listed in the center there.
mhm.
And what I was thinking was it all starts with that purpose, and then your follow-on conversation to DJ's question to you seemed to speak to that purpose. Um, Background, how did you get here? How did you get to this point? What are your motives? I think if we can have a common purpose and talk about that, then it gives us an understanding that we all or we both want the same thing, but we have to understand that there are different ways of getting there. And if we do it together and leverage one another, then we're much more apt to get where we all want to be if we have that common purpose. Was it happenstance or is that you did that on purpose to the purpose right at
I
the
did
top?
I did it I did it specifically because I knew you would see that, Bill. And I wanted to make sure that it was sort of happenstance. Yes, and part of it was just the way it fit into the Venn diagram because it's a shorter word. But yeah, I do think that, and here's Bill, here's the piece that I think is important around that. There's a great difference between parroting the mission and the vision of an organization
Mhm,
versus really talking about why are you here right now?
mhm,
Because I find often what we talk about is, and I'll use the example of our own organization. We have a Carillion Clinic physician blueprint when we formed the clinic, and it was basically a visionary document of what would it look like to, quote, put the patient in the center of everything that we do. A beautiful sentiment, and I do believe that that should be our aspiration. And I don't believe that that's exclusive. So putting the patient at the center of everything we do doesn't mean that we don't put other people or other groups also as important, such as the people who are providing the care, which, as Bill knows, a passion of mine has been clinician and care team well-being, and how do we make sure that those who are providing the care are well themselves. Um, and and so, Bill, getting back to your question of purpose, even thinking to the level of, okay, and I'll look at it through a clinician lens, and I'm looking across at my administrative colleague who is an MBA, in this case, that's true, and thinking he's never seen a patient. Like, so for him to say, I put the patient at the center of everything I do, feels a little bit cynical or hypocritical because how do you know what? So the way that he sees patients, or in this case, he, is through supporting those who do. and supporting the enterprise for those who do. Even having that dialogue changes things. So it goes from me as a clinician thinking, well, you have no idea about my world, to all of a sudden realizing you exist to help support me to be able to do the work that I do. And that alone, different than parroting, we're here to improve the health of the communities we serve, which is our mission statement, changes the relationship. And so that idea, because as we know, we as coaches particularly know that everybody has a story as to why they're doing what it is that they're doing. And those stories are way more compelling than, again, I went to medical school and got my degree and I liked people and science and therefore I became a physician. Way different than that. There's usually something driving us that gets to that purpose, Bill. And so to me, having that as the initial conversation, it's that conversation. What's important to you in this work?
Hmm.
Why do you get up every morning to do this? There's lots of things. Again, you look at the second word there, intelligence. There's lots of things you could be doing, and you chose to do this, and this wasn't the easiest path. Again, not just for clinicians, but also for administrators. Like there's a lot of different ways to use your MBA that are probably both way easier and way more lucrative than what you're doing now, but you chose this. Why? There's a story there. So to me, that just that common story becomes so important. And then, as I shared, extrapolating from that to expectations. So now we have been put together. We're a core nuclear team. What's this supposed to look like? And within our organization, it doesn't look the same across leadership dyads because some of that has to do with personality, some of that has to do with strengths and shortcomings and how do they complement each other. So it becomes not mechanical, like, okay, you know the numbers, so you do budgets, and I know the patients, so I do this. It really does become synergistic down and personalized down to the level of the individual. And I would continue to do the same thing with groups, with teams, is you have to do that same process.
And
So
that's
we've
okay.
got a
The other thing
question.
that's,
You
yeah,
go.
I'm sorry, the other thing that struck me while you were talking, Mark, is that we all have to consider this right now because a little crack can become a fissure, which becomes a huge gap as the pressure mounts. And we saw something this morning that 70% of the chief financial officers across the nation report a 2% or lower operating margin for their organization.
Yep.
And a healthy system needs a 4% operating margin at least to keep reinvesting.
Yep.
Half of what it needs to be with 70% of the folks around the country, pressure is going to mount on the finances. And we have to have leadership sorted out and self-actualized in meaningful ways now because we thought we had pressure before, but the pressure is just going to mount.
Yeah,
And I
thank
would,
you. Yeah, thank you for
I
all
would,
the payer market conversations that are going on, right? But the revenue cycle piece, and I'm doing some work in one system in that space, and it is a fascinating laboratory for learning a lot about a lot of things. But but the thing that I also see is the tension. So we started talking about the tensions that are inherent here, the tension between non-clinical leaders and clinical leaders around the resources and around the revenue cycle and the finger pointing. So we just finished the archetype conversation, Brad, and I'm going to come to you for your question. We just finished that 3-week course, and I said to look out for two things, right? The victim conversation and the judge. And when I go into the rooms, the judge is locked and loaded, right? So it's like watching how the judgment gets in the way of what, Mark, you're talking about is these hero stories. And so one of the things that we could borrow here from pharmaceuticals is they do bright spot stories about why people do what they do. And almost always the end result for the clinical trials, for whatever it is the patient's story, but they also bring the physicians, the researchers, the executives along, and their stories are shared so that the humanity underlying it all is first and foremost in what gets presented. And there's more fun around it than there is in the actual practice of medicine in the hospital system.
Well, and it humanizes it in a different way.
Humanizes it, yeah.
A 2% versus 4% profit margin or margin, that's important, and it's that there's nothing human in that. And that so to translate that down, even build that idea of why from an administrative perspective, why is that important
Right.
for patient care? Like why, as you point out, like we can't continue to grow and contribute optimally to the community if we don't have some breathing space. Then translating that down to the team, because we're seeing it happen here right now. We're in that space of feeling not just pressure now, but anticipatory pressure of what might happen with cuts that could be coming or not. And it doesn't always bring out, it has the opportunity to bring out the best in people, but it doesn't always. And so, again, as coaches, being able to say, how are we helping to guide people to regulate around that, even to be asking the questions. So, how are you navigating through that pressure right now? What's coming out of you under stress that may not be your A game best self, that's actually impeding progress, even though it may feel good to vent every now and then? What's your outlet for that so it doesn't impact negatively what's happening among the team who's trying to move forward and figure this out?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to, Brad, I really am coming to you.
You
The
take your time, DJ.
but the notion of having people start sharing what you shared, Mark, when you started today, about when I put on the administrator hat, I wasn't happy with the clinician in me. And when I put on the clinician hat, I wasn't happy with that, or, that's summarizing.
Yeah.
So it's like the tension in those roles within each leader within the system is something to be reconciled. And it's also something to be recognized. So getting people to a place that they can share that in their stories. When I do this and I show up this way, it's because this is not natural for me, right? So it's just claiming authentically where we're most comfortable, where we feel led, and what we're working on. And that just levels the playing field. So Brad, coming to you, what's your question? Because you've been dying to ask it. I can feel that.
Well, it's more statement. First, Janet, hello. I forgot to say hello when you said hello before. And thank you guys so much for putting this together. I feel, Mark, we have such commonality that, God, I want you to coach me. It's probably a separate conversation in itself. But just by introduction, for those that don't know me, I'm also the chief medical officer in a community hospital in a 28 hospital health system at Northwell Health, and also a practicing internist, which I do on Monday and Friday afternoons, heading there soon afterwards. And I guess I'm going to start introducing myself as a coach in addition. I love that you had put that there, Mark, as part of that. My comment to you, Bill, really was more than a question. Was my hospital has been celebrated because we talk so much about our triad, our leadership triad of being our hospital president, our CNO, and our CMO, and the alignment between the three of us. We just received the Baldrige National Recipient Award, and they talked and celebrated our leadership triad and our leadership strategy as it reflects on that. So when you said as you're a president of a hospital by yourself, it made me just think about looking at that as a triad model and what that could look like, which may be very beneficial to you in some kind of formulation around that. So I don't know, that's more a comment than a statement, I would say. And then Mark, listen, so much what you said. I'm not even going to, everybody can say this. I'm so grateful for you guys putting this together. This hits home so dearly to me. This is like exactly the conversation I need to have, quite honestly.
Well, Brad, thank you for that. You are on a hero's journey in your hospital system, and we are actually benefiting from how you have carried the flag for coaching inside from the community hospital point of view into the bigger system and into the innovation center and all the things that Northwell is getting really right in the world. And you are. So there's
DJ, if I could ask Brad a question, maybe.
Yeah.
So thank you, Brad. Love what you just shared, and it's interesting. Again, congratulations on the Baldrige Award. That's a big dog deal. I don't want to just skip over that. And what I heard you say was, even in the midst of that, what you just heard us talking about is something that's resonating really deeply with you. So there's something for you, despite all that high function, that's still saying, "Oh man, there's some untapped stuff here." I'm curious, what is that untapped? What's untapped that you're excited about today?
Oh God, so much to that question. I would say, for one, is how do we evolve with the pressures that are oncoming, right? That triad model dissolves with our system being at a 1.2 operating margin, at a $28 billion organization, right? And our hospital in a budgetary gap at the moment, right? And how do we continue to maintain that strength that we're celebrated about when the pressures come on around the finances and budgets itself? So I think that's part of my thought on that. And what I felt as a physician leader, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Mark, is that a lot of the leaning to me around the expertise is around the clinical situations and also managing physicians themselves and being a physician and what that looks like, because we're a foreign entity to a lot of administrators and how to actually work with physicians in a meaningful way, right? So I would say part of what's resonating here is that I certainly don't have the answers. I don't think we have the answers. And to be able to shine light on this is really wonderful, to really try to figure out the answers to this.
And what I will say, Brad, and I'll ask DJ to make sure. I think I have your email, but if I don't, back into the fall, into January, with a colleague, I co-wrote 3 articles that were published in the family medicine literature, but I think they're very relevant beyond the family medicine literature. It was just where it was easy to get it published for me. That gets to the very thing you're talking about. First of all, the first article was about physician autonomy, and it's not all that. The second article was about administrative and physician leaders, dyads in this case, but the triad can work equally well, and kind of looking at each other's perspective. So what they need from each other, if you will. And then the third article was about the straddling roles between, as physicians, us being both those roles at the same time. So I'll make sure you get a copy of those.
So truth be told, Mark, in 2 of those articles, I'd love the medical article you mentioned. You had mentioned that in one of our classes.
Very good.
I actually took that article, printed it, and handed it out to our entire senior leadership team for discussion in one of our senior leadership meetings, because I thought it was so well written and so to the point.
And so I'm curious what came out of that? Like, what came out in the discussion?
Silence. Because I think I didn't preface that I was going to be doing it, and it was in the middle of a meeting. But I think what others have told me is a real acknowledgement around trying to come up with a mutual understanding for Bill to understand the way his CMO is thinking, and for the CMO to understand what Bill is thinking is so critical to this. And then as you can expand this to the other senior leaders itself, how do we think together as a cohesive unit? We can argue, but we got to come up with the continuous mutual respect of working together and working well together, right? And I think you very well highlighted those differences, which both sets of people really need to acknowledge and understand.
Yeah, on our own, we're toast.
Yeah, on both sides, right? Physician leaders are criticized frequently because they're only thinking as physicians. Right. And it's an us versus them mentality when it comes to physician leadership. And then you have the administrators on the other side saying, physician leaders, they don't understand finances. They don't understand consumerism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Because there's that bias around that.
Well, and the whole idea of we just can't be this little romantic thought. Like it really has to, it comes back to us defining what we looks like, and gets back to Bill pointing out, let's really talk about purpose. Like, we're really here for the same thing. We're just emphasizing different aspects of that same thing. And how can we make sure that we're truly in sync rather than just thinking that we're in sync?
Yeah, even leveraging each other's strengths, right?
Oh, yeah.
To come up with a better goal than what each of us could have done alone.
Yep, by far.
How many of you have been patients in the health system, in your health system at all, or in the past year? How many of you have been patients?
Oh, I was this
Other
week.
than my annual exam, you mean, or?
Yeah. How many of you have been patients in the care of those people that you commissioned to care for people? It's a really interesting experience. I have been doing this since 2012. We decided to put a stake in the ground early on, and I was a patient on April 1st, on April Fool's Day, and admitted to a heart center on the 2nd. And went in totally unexpected, And I will tell you, this is the bottom line of it. The care I was given was exquisite at the Rex, nearby Rex Hospital, part of the UNC system, Brett. Um, but to a letter, everybody was on purpose, and they stayed in the conversation, and it was a mystery thing. It still is a mystery thing, and I'm fine, but it wasn't fine for a 24-hour period. But the one thing I want to share this, because I think this goes back to your bright light stories and to your triads and to your dyads. The one thing that happened that was significant was the floor supervisor in the Rex Heart Center started taking me when they moved me out of ER into that center. She patted my hand, and I said, "So what brought you to Rex Hospital?" And she started the story. And she's only been there for 4 years. She said, "I listened to the voice of God. God told me
Mm.
I had finished in California. I was supposed to come to North Carolina. I came without a job. I got hired right away at Rex." But she went through why this was meaningful work for her, and that her daughter ended up being an RN because she's an RN, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, "I'm still trying to figure out why I'm here." And she patted my hand and looked me in the eye and said, "Sometimes we get a you to remind us of why we do this. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about you learning anything. It's about the gift of having you in our hospital." So
Oh,
everything that they said, from the eight EKGs to the, you name it, all the nuclear tests, everything, was exquisite care. And so what I want you to see is, if you haven't been a patient in your hospital lately, go get in touch with what those people are saying about why they do what they do, and showcase those stories, because it is a reorientation for anybody, even me, from looking out, training, coaching skills for all of you. It gave me new narrative. So I just want you to look at that. And if you have been a patient recently in your system, Bill, Mark, others, what story do you have that's worth sharing and sending to the CEO of the hospital to say, "I want to acknowledge the Tashas and the Bernitas and the Rachels and the Makia and the people with really interesting accents that work for us and aren't from here"?
TJ, can I just say one thing for those guys answer that question? First, God, I hope you're okay. I
I
don't know
am.
if any of us can
I'm
survive
perfect.
without you.
I've been checked out. I'm perfect. But
You,
here's the other thing, is that they said they're seeing a lot of people who are particularly empaths, who are showing up with symptoms that look like
yes,
heart failure or heart
yes,
attacks or
yes,
high stress. And that is in the meta conversation. And so just know that that's going to be,
yes.
it's front and center.
So
So go ahead.
my one comment was next week is Nurses Week at our hospital. I think it's national, right?
mm-hmm.
What we do and celebrate is we do walk in my shoes, where hospital leaders, including myself, will spend the morning walking in a nurse's shoes, walking paired with a nurse, frontline nurse.
Brilliant.
Um, and you're absolutely right. I've learned so much from doing that, of things that I had no idea was going on. So I highly recommend it, to just get an upset, to really see a different perspective of delivering care that you may not be in your wheelhouse.
Well, your nurses became famous during the pandemic because
Yes.
they were on who's what, America's Got Talent.
Yes, that
They
nursing
actually
choir,
performed, they
The
sang,
nurses
and they
choir.
sang in the hospital. They sang for patients hanging out the windows. They sang, and they were featured. And it was one of the first times I'd ever heard of Northwell Hospital.
which is
So
remarkable, right? And those
it,
nurses, some
yeah,
of them at my hospital, we just got magnet with distinction, which is a very high honor on the magnet, survey. And a lot of this is around this empathic interdisciplinary care.
yeah, great. But no, watch your empaths and watch your patient populations there too. So if it looks like mystery meat showing up and people come to their meetings and they say, "We don't know what's going on, but there are all these people getting checked in the emergency room, and they end up, being okay, and we're sending them home with big bills." And, and it's like, okay, what's that about? And it is because they are watching news stories of people standing on bridges that were getting ready to nuke. That, like, the
Mhm.
stories are so pervasive and invasive that we don't know how we're reacting to stress. Like I thought I was cool, right? I apparently wasn't cool.
Externally,
So
maybe not internally, right?
yeah, yes. So I mean, all of you, and I'm sorry to bring on a personal thing, but just to know that there's a wake up call for all of us right now, and how we hold those who care.
Well, and what I would add to that, but first of all, I've put all three articles, somebody else
Right.
put one of them. All
Yeah,
three article
Lauren.
links
Lauren did.
are in the chat. So, and Brad, if you don't get those, I'm happy to download those or send them to you as well.
Thank you, Mark.
Please disseminate it widely because I think these are conversations that we need to be having. The patient piece is interesting because the other thing that happens with systems under stress, and in this case, we're talking about healthcare, is that we can start becoming transactional.
Yes.
And that starts at the leadership level.
Yeah.
So, and what I see often happen is we start talking about numbers and budgets and visits and volumes, and we as leaders can forget that each one of them has a DJ story. For each one of them, as we say here, anybody who shows up in the ER, that's potentially the worst day of their life at that moment in time. We don't always think that way when we're thinking transactionally. We're thinking throughput. We're not thinking about human, and again, especially under pressure. So how do we invite all of our employees, but starting with the physicians, to be owners and not renters? Because when you're being transactional, you're looking after yourself more than you're looking after something bigger than yourself. So Bill, back to purpose. How do we help each other, not eye roll anchor to purpose, but literally anchor to purpose? And I believe that's by conversations that we invite each other to remind each other why it is that we're doing what we're doing by telling stories around that, by telling the story of how this patient came in and here's what happened and here's what I took away from that and here's how that actually uplifted me or here's how I think that made a difference. I think when we're being transactional, we look at the end of the day at number of visits, how many RVUs, how many no-shows, which are soulless. They're important. Again, as I put on my administrator hat, very important, but soulless. And so how do we bring and maintain the soul into what we do? And I think leaders, we're responsible to do that as leaders.
I think Mark, like that's where, like I'm one of the dyad partners. I used to be patient
Yeah.
care time ago, but that's all I do find or do admin now. That's part of my job is to manage the stuff that doesn't matter, right? So that you can clear your head, focus on the person in front of you. Because by and large, all physicians, all frontline staff are there to care for that sole person in that sole moment. And when it gets messed up is when leadership starts having physicians like you guys think about stuff that's not you or the patient. So my center circle is only the physician and only the nurses because I don't see patients anymore. So I put you first so you can put the patient first. So send me your noise, send me your garbage, send me your stuff. I can call DJ if I got a problem, right? But the thing there is making sure that you understand where your split is so that you're not trying to have to hurdle. And you have to be aware of the finance stuff because you're going to go in the CEO's office. He's going to be, Mark, what the, yeah. But
Oh, yeah.
you can let them do the math so you can do the caring. And that's where helping empowering your dyad so that they're not just following you around with a clipboard or taking notes in a meeting so they understand the finance piece. They understand the WRVU, understand that when you're on call, you're not in the clinic and this is doing other stuff. They're the people who can help you put that puzzle together so that when you're in the clinic or in a case, you can just be in the case.
Where we want you to be. If I'm the one being
That's
operated
brilliant, Brett.
on, I want you totally present in that case.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Mark,
that's changed for you since we met you and you went through the school, right?
Yeah,
That
it's been
role has become significant in your population, but it's also for you a perfect fit.
yeah, it all except, and we talked about it in the coaching course. Right? I was struggling with it.
Right.
If
Right.
you look Dale Waxman's continuum of burnout, I was on the burnout path, man. It was a pretty rough few months for me. But we got through it. It was tough. But some stuff opened up and the winding path of the world what makes its way to where it is now. And now I'm in a place where I don't coach them like I normally would because I'm in there chain of command, so I can't just coach them, but I do my coaching on the side with the system, and I coach my administrative leaders out there, tell them how they should present themselves for the chair and how to get ready and have a better leadership conversation and how to coach their team. So yeah, it's all the stuff that we kind of dreamed of.
That kind of makes me cry.
And I love his little puppy is now like, I'm a
Oh, the
chill.
big puppy.
I know.
Remember when it was like, woo?
Right,
Now
right.
it's just like, yeah, I'm
I
fine.
got
I
told she
know.
got to go
There
on
you
a
go,
diet.
Debbie.
That's how big she got.
Oh, it's crazy. So, Debbie, anything in this that's resonating for you that you want to perhaps tease out a little bit more, or ask a question around, or share?
It's something that we address within Banner as well. I mean, I actually have dyads come to my leadership course and they talk. So I have a physician executive and an operation leader come and they talk about the same thing. They have the Venn diagram. They talk about just Brett, what you were talking about. Okay, these are mine, and this is where we tackle it in the middle. And we're also focused on well-being and burnout. We have one of the lowest scores of burnout in the nation. And so this is just stuff that reinforces what we're already doing. And I love the articles. I'm already thinking of who I can share them with. So thank you, Mark, for sharing that. But it really is something that we need to focus on and really address to help.
Brilliant. I'm glad that you're in that leadership role
Yep.
and that you are thriving in that space too. That makes me want to cry. So, so as we wrap up, Mark, we've got about 10 minutes just for any other questions and answers, but I'll leave that to you maybe for one more question if anybody has one, and then for you to bring it home.
Well,
And let's give Lauren a little bit of time to say what's coming next because we have Marcia on
soon.
tap for next week, next Wednesday. But so
Yeah.
if you want to wrap your part of it up, and then we'll kind of go into what's next.
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, thank you all for being here. Cormac, I know you didn't come online, but I look forward to hearing your thoughts and please email them if nothing else. Yeah, this is important, and we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't. I wouldn't have spent the time writing those articles if I didn't think it's really essential. And what pains me as I look through both my leadership lenses and my coaching lens is how much energy is spent on on not addressing dysfunction when addressing dysfunction could it's the proverbial low-hanging fruit, if you will, by having conversations that unfortunately often don't happen. And that's where we as coaches often, my role with dyads and triads is to be a conversational catalyst. It's to ask a question in the middle that everybody is thinking, but none of them ask of each other because of whatever stories we tell in our heads. And beginning to have the folks engage in that dialogue is often magic, and watching those aha moments. I had no idea you thought this, or I had no idea this was your story. Bringing the human into this, I think, is going to be even more essential for we leaders because of all those pressures and all the things that are going to drive us away from our own humanness to become more cold hard steel, if you will, to become more numbers and tables and balance, budget balances. And so the temptation to resist the necessity of resisting that, I think, is going to be really, really important. And again, I believe it starts with human to human. That's where we're going to ultimately meet each other.
Yeah. And is there any other conversation to have other than human to human, right? That's like
Yeah,
humanity.
start there and
Yeah.
then build on that.
Yeah, humanity is in a inflection point, right? Which is why coaching is here and important. Lauren, we're coming back to you, and you can tell us what's coming next week and then what to expect in maybe a month or so.
Great. Yes, and just thank you, Mark. All of what you're saying, especially the data and numbers piece and how it's important to prioritize the human aspect, still lives outside of healthcare as well. It takes me back to technology where that is the space, right? And when we got into these really high friction moments, a lot of it was humans weren't talking to humans, right? We lead really heavy with data and numbers in that industry, which is great also, right? So needed. But yeah, I would have to remind ourselves, and that's that we worked with leaders, right? Leadership development, going through these programs where that's what we would remind people is how to step in and, like you said, be the catalyst for those conversations. So I think you have even a bigger impact, of course, in this healthcare space, but I think it's also a very common thing that's just happening across industries, across the board here. All right, so as we wrap up, I'm just going to drop the Vibe Tribe page for anyone who hasn't visited yet. I encourage everyone to check it out. It has all of our upcoming sessions on that page, and you'll see Marcia as our next speaker, which is coming up quickly. This one we usually do once a month, but April is a special month, so she will be with us next Wednesday from 12 to 1:30. There's a button to subscribe and register as well, and we're excited to have her. So she is going to be talking about her second edition of Coach the Person, Not the Problem, and focusing a little bit more on like leading through chaos, leading through change, as a way of entry into the work around her new book. And we also have, I won't go through every single one in detail. I would love for you guys to look at this and also pass it along to folks who you think would enjoy these conversations and add to them. But just to highlight to you for next month, we have Tasha. She's also a member of the faculty for HCI and talking about a really interesting one I'm looking forward to with hospicing and healthcare. Or sorry, hospicing is like a leadership
Model.
concept model. Yes, thank you.
That it's going to be fascinating. So yeah, so if I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Please do, please do.
Hospicing is a modern leadership model, and there's so much we can learn. All of us probably, I'm going to just say all of us have been touched by, someone in the hospice world and the way they care for people. And to have that come on as a new lens to hold over leadership, I think is really timely. It's important because we are equally giving birth to and saying goodbye to some ways of being in leadership and in medicine. And I think this is going to be a rich conversation. So bring your pals into the room. But I love having small groups like this. When we say it's an island of sanity, right, Lauren? It's nice to have everybody have a voice and be heard. So thank you for coming and teasing out this work with Mark today and with us. And thank you, Lauren, for continuing to manage this and pull innovative ideas through. We're going to be doing something for Coaching Week, which is the 11th through the 17th. We don't know what yet. We're putting that together. So if you have ideas or if you have a need or you want to play and help produce something, know that we're happy to feature you all. Part of what we've done over time is feature our students in articles. I've written articles together. I put people on platforms for keynote speeches. So if there's something that you've got in mind that you want to bring to life, don't hesitate to reach out, Lauren at pyramidresource.com. She's a great person to meet with you and to kind of tease out the idea. And we're so lucky to have you, Lauren. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, as always, for the time that you spent curating this and bringing to life what you're seeing as a trend. And we love you. And so we're so grateful for your time.
Thank you, DJ. It's great to see everybody. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, thank you all.
Happy Friday,
Janet,
guys.
I'm here if you need me. We'll talk soon.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.